The next living legend to be recognized is Barbara A. Durand. Dr. Durand is a longtime advocate for nurse leadership and was on the vanguard of promoting advanced practice nursing and the role of the nurse practitioner. During the 1970s, she developed and pioneered a pediatric nurse practitioner curriculum at University of California, San Francisco. And she was a charter member of the American Nurses Association's Pediatric Nurse Practitioner Council. Dr. Durand testified several times before Congress on the utilization of nurse practitioners, all the while she maintained a primary care practice. She's been rightly honored for her years of outstanding work. She received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Conference for Nurse Practitioners. Let's have Dr. Catherine Gillis, one of Dr. Durand's sponsors, say a bit more.
Barbara Durand deserves to be a living legend. There's no question about that in my mind or in the minds of those who joined me in this nomination. Barbara is an extraordinary pioneer in primary care nursing. She led the way for those of us who became nurse practitioners, for those of us who developed programs that brought more nurse practitioners in the world, and for those of us who have attempted to collaborate with other disciplines, both in professional societies and in the preparation of young healthcare providers in their careers. Barbara has truly been instrumental in all of those areas. Barbara has an uncommon ability to both see the big picture and know what small steps need to be taken to advance us in succeeding and taking full advantage of those opportunities. Barbara is someone who many people who know her well would think of as a detailist. Barbara wrote her dissertation on yellow paper, beginning every day with 15 number 2 pencils in her hand, all perfectly sharpened up and ready to go for a day's worth of writing. But that in itself is just, I think, one image of how Barbara approaches her work with extraordinary preparation, and she produces a fabulous result. I'll always remember being the mother of a small child visiting my general pediatric pediatrician for my children, and looking over the shoulder of the pediatrician to his bookcase and seeing sitting behind him a book entitled Handbook for Primary Care. And it was a book that Barbara and her colleague Marilyn Chow had written, and written so well that it was adopted by physicians and nurses alike in the practice of primary care. For me, that was a very empowering moment as a young academic. I realized that nurses could collaborate effectively with physicians to bring about better care, and that scholarship was an important part of that. Barbara Durand is an inspiration to me personally for the way in which she has combined her professional and her personal life. She is someone who embraces very fully the activities in which she is engaged, the people with whom she is engaged, and she makes a difference both in the situation and in the lives of the people around her. Barbara is there paying attention to what people say and do, and without telling them what to do, Barbara asks the right question at the right time and helps people to realize what they should do. At the end of our careers, many of us will have quite a few accomplishments of which we're quite proud. But the thing that Barbara Durand will have, that many of us will not have, is an adoring fan club of people whose lives she has really touched throughout her own career.
I prepared remarks. And the first thing I have to say is I am so profoundly surprised to be receiving this honor. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever imagine this. And speaking of wildest dreams, I'm reminded of Don Halverson, who's a wonderful pediatric orthopedist from the University of Oklahoma, and who, on receiving an award from Triad Hospitals in 2006, began his remarks by saying, "Last night in our hotel room, I said to my wife, 'Sweetheart, in your wildest dreams, did you ever imagine that I would be receiving this award?' To which she replied, 'Sweetheart, you aren't in my wildest dreams.'" But this is a real dream. And it is an honor that I accept with indescribable pride and humility and appreciation. Over the past couple of months, as I tried to figure out how this had come to be, I found myself thinking again and again about those people in my life who mentored me, although at the time it was happening, I was probably not aware enough to use that word to describe what they were doing. But it became clear to me that, in fact, my first mentor was my mother, Pat Casey Durand. She and her only sibling, Boyd Casey, were born early in the 1900s and raised in the farthest corner of northwest North Dakota that you could find, where it butts up against Saskatchewan and Montana. Mother lost her dad to smallpox I think when she was 5 years old. And so she and my Uncle Boyd and our wondrous Grandma Casey went on to become one of the strongest and most loving family units I have ever seen. Mom graduated in 1929 from the St. Mary's Hospital School of Nursing in Rochester, Minnesota. And I have her diploma signed by the Mayo brothers to prove it. At her graduation, she announced to Nana and Uncle Boyd that she was not going back to northwestern North Dakota. And she proceeded to get on a Greyhound bus and got off in Greenwich Village, where she met my father in a speakeasy. They had 6 children, 5 of whom are here tonight. Myself, my brother Dennis, my brother Michael, my sister Mary, and my brother Jim. And our beloved older brother Ron is not far away. He's just across the river in Arlington National Cemetery. Along with my siblings, there are nieces, nephews, cousins, in-laws, grandchildren, in fact 34 of them, Caseys and Durands, plus our family priest, Father Steve, who have honored me by coming tonight. We're a family that loves to have fun, and sometimes can be noisy and boisterous in the process. And I just want to say to you all, I love you to pieces. But if you have reason to think that you are in the will, I would suggest that you let that thought guide your behavior. When I was growing up, options for middle-class Irish Catholic girls were limited. Teacher, nurse, or nun. My mother, whom we refer to as a professional Irish Catholic, tried to convince me that I could be all 3. But she eventually settled for 2 out of 3. My Aunt Eileen Casey also counseled me as I was going off to nursing school. She was anticipating, of course, that I would wind up with a physician husband. And with due respect and apologies to any surgeons,
pediatricians or dentists in the audience, she advised that I not select you. Although surgeons were well dressed, she said, they got up too early every morning of their lives. Pediatricians got phone calls all through the night from anxious mothers, and dentists were on their feet all day and came home cranky. My best choice, she advised, would be a pathologist or a radiologist. I kid you not, Casey, this is what your anti-lean told you. Anyhow, I don't know how or why I've been so blessed, but blessed I have been. My very first professional mentor I met in 1962. That would be 52 years ago. I was in my master's program at UCSF and was assigned to this amazing woman for my practice teaching. Her name is Camille Leger Cook, and she is here tonight, and I would like to acknowledge her. We've been friends and colleagues for over 50 years, and I still do everything she tells me. My introduction to the nurse practitioner movement came in 1971 at UCSF, when my department chair, Betty Hiley, called me into her office and told me the faculty had decided that this new idea was a good one and the wave of the future, and they were prepared to invest in a PNP program. And that I had been selected to be the first faculty member who would become a pediatric nurse practitioner and develop the role and work to design the curriculum. Now, I had heard about the pediatric nurse practitioner. There was an article in Time magazine, and I think it was 1969, that mentioned this bold program at the University of Colorado by this upstart nurse, Loretta Ford, and her pediatrician collaborator, Henry Silver. I didn't really pay too much attention. I didn't view myself opening an office in rural Colorado or rural anywhere. And I was vaguely aware that organized medicine and nursing were not terribly supportive at the time. I remember saying to Betty, "Why me?" And she said, "Because you get along with physicians." To which I inappropriately replied, "I should, I've dated most of them." And to which she replied, "We know." Anyhow, to my everlasting good fortune, a pediatrician named Don Fink, who was chief of pediatric ambulatory care at UCSF, supported the idea and agreed to teach me and our first student, Marilyn Chow, who is here. I mean, how lucky was I? That he taught us how to do the physical exam. And with Doris Dunbar, they mentored both of us as we integrated these skills into our nursing framework. And I just want to mention, 3 months ago, I had lunch with Don in San Francisco. He's 82 and he's still wonderful. But it was Don who orchestrated what proved to be one of the most liberating moments of my life. The notion of the nurse practitioner was new. People were curious, physicians in particular were curious, and we got invited to the Vallejo Medical Society quarterly meeting to talk about it. So Don and I drove from San Francisco over to Vallejo. After the dinner, there were many questions asked. Don answered most of them, but I managed a few responses. And that was fine. The next invitation we got was the East Bay Medical Society quarterly meeting in Oakland. And Don said to me, "I'm not going. You're going." And I drove across that Bay Bridge feeling extremely anxious and concerned and scared to death. And after the dinner, there were probably about 40 physicians there, I got up and made my remarks, and then there was time for questions. And during my remarks, I could tell by looking at the folks, there were maybe 4 or 5 physicians who looked supportive and would smile. Most of them just looked skeptical, and there was one guy in the back who looked evil. And the minute I said, okay, are there any questions? His hand shot up, and he said, and what are you going to do the first time you miss a hot abdomen? And I, thank you, opened my mouth, and out came words that I would never have predicted when I said, well, I suppose the same thing you do when you miss one. It changed my life. During the 70s, when we were so actively promoting the role, the stars again aligned, and I actually got to meet and work with Loretta Ford, without whom so many of us wouldn't be here, and who just sent me a congratulatory email saying, it's wonderful to get the roses while you can still smell them. You talk about living legends. To me, she will always be the definition of courage and fearlessness. Then there was Ingeborg Mauch, who actively mentored all 100 of us Robert Wood Johnson Fellows in Primary Care, which was, I think, the first fellowship ever for nurses. And who once told me, when Catherine Gillis and I were having lunch with her in Florida, she said, Barbie, you need to be running something. And then there was Greta, our beloved Greta Stiles, who is really responsible for me having been considered for the deanship at ASU. I wasn't looking, but she contacted the search committee, told them to contact me. They did, I did, and I wound up having the best job of my life. I found the nursing community in Arizona to be professional and up to date, and I have developed relationships there that will last forever. And I put Eileen Breslin and Joy Ridenauer, Kathy Malik, and Terry Pipe at the top of that list. Now, to be a leader, among other things, one needs motivation. And that's where Claire Fagan comes in. For those of you who may not know Claire Fagan, she is a tall, slim, elegant, profoundly powerful woman who at the time was the dean at Penn. And in 1969, I gave my very first professional presentation. It was at the Council of Baccalaureate and Higher Degree Programs in Kansas City at the Muehlebach Hotel. Only really old people will remember that. But I was on a panel about innovative patterns of professional practice. And I presented my work with a severely retarded child and his family. And that panel was chaired by Claire Fagan, and after I finished, she was very complimentary about my work and presentation. 11 years later, at the annual meeting of the RWJ Primary Care Fellows in Nashville, I ran into her in the crowded lobby of the hotel. She said, I remember you. Where did you get your doctorate? And when I told her I hadn't gotten my doctorate, she threw up her hands and said loud enough for everybody in the hotel to hear, what? I am appalled. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is motivation. As soon as I got home, I sent off for the applications. I signed up for a GRE prep course, and 4 years later, I had my doctorate. So, with the added benefit of world-class mentors, I reached a place where my heart and soul and mind and DNA have become and remain rooted in the significance of our profession. That evolution has been enabled by so many of you, my amazing family, my spectacular colleagues, and the powerful leaders who have gone before us. I'm going to finish with 2 brief anecdotes, one about the universality of nursing and the other about our core values. In May of this year, and retirement is wonderful, I found myself on the island of Patmos, Greece, in the Aegean Sea. I signed up for, I was on a cruise, and I signed up for an excursion to the beach. And about 20 of us were taken by a bus to the beach, and between the time we left the ship and arrived at the beach, the weather changed. The sun was gone, the wind came up, it was gray, it was cold, it was windy. And when we got to the beach, it was clear that this was not going to be a wonderful day. But the bus had already left, so we had to go into Georgia's place, which was a beachside cafe. And I'm sitting behind a palm tree, trying to shield myself from the wind, and in walks a young couple carrying an infant. And they walk across to the far side and sit down with people. It took me about a minute and a half to intervene. The infant had no socks or shoes on. It was freezing. So I got up and walked over to them and said, with my beach towel, I said, I guess it's the pediatric nurse in me, but if you need this for the baby to keep her warm. Oh, the mother took it. She said, thank you. I came down on the moped. My husband brought the baby in the car but forgot the blanket. Fine. About 10 minutes later, this young woman came walking across and said, could I ask you a question? And I said, of course. And I kid you not, her first question was, how do you mix rice cereal with... And for pediatric nurses in the room, you will understand, this is the first question that mothers ask when they're starting to transition from nursing to solids. And no intern or resident on earth knows the answer to that question the first day they get to the pediatric clinic. And what went on was a complete well baby visit, the 6-month well baby checkup on the beach in Patmos. And it just reminded me how much I love what I have done and what we do. And finally, when we were leaving, she came over to return the towel. And I said, no, this is for you with the compliments of Regent Seven Seas Cruise Lines. And finally, a very brief story about the Dalai Lama. And I read this essay not long ago. It was in a magazine, and it was written by a gentleman from Santa Fe, New Mexico, who had met the Dalai Lama and in the 80s. And after being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989, the Dalai Lama made a tour of the United States and was invited by this young man to come to Santa Fe. He came with his small entourage of 4 or 5 fellow monks. And at one point in his stay, he said he would love to see the mountains and ski. So off they went. I'm guessing they went up to Taos. There are a couple of photographs showing the monk and Dalai Lama and his friends in their saffron robes on a quad chair going up the mountain. And the Dalai Lama had never seen people skiing before. When they got to the top of the hill, they had slowed the lift down so that they could get off and walk off the chair. And as they were walking around, looking in every direction, and he was saying, wouldn't this be wonderful in Tibet? And that they had similar topography, but certainly no skiing. Well, suddenly someone started screaming, watch out. And the chair had come up again with 4 teenage girls on it, and there was no one there to stop it. They skied off into the Dalai Lama and his friends, and there was suddenly this huge pile of saffron robes and teenage girls in skis and screaming, and people ran over, and the screaming was coming from the Dalai Lama. He was at the bottom of the pile laughing himself silly. So they went down to the lodge to warm up. A young waitress, and this is a quote, with tangled, dirty blonde hair and beaded headband, this was the 80s, came to clean the table. And she sat down across from him and asked in all seriousness, what is the meaning of life? Now, in the whole week he had been in Santa Fe, no one had come to the point of daring to ask that really big question. And he apparently leaned forward, focusing only on her, and said, "The meaning of life is happiness. Hard question is not, what is the meaning of life? That is easy question. Hard question is, what make happiness? Money, big house, accomplishments, friends, or compassion and good heart?" That resonates powerfully to me. I think nurses and nursing occupy a place and a way of life where knowledge, wisdom, kindness, compassion, and good heart are the things that matter. And I hope nursing is enriching your life as it has enriched mine. And from the bottom of my heart again, I thank you for this honor.